What's up guys, Sean here, and today we're going to talk about broken windows policing. But first, I want to give a special shout out to my patrons. Apollo Legend, Pepe Loves Trump, Mike Barbarossa, Louis Cool Dance, Michael, Tina, and Chelsea. You guys make this whole YouTube thing possible for me, so I wanted to give you guys a special thank you. So I wanted to make this video because broken windows policing has been getting a lot of negative press attention since the rise of Black Lives Matter and this push for criminal justice reform coming from the left. And unfortunately, a lot of this negative press attention is completely unwarranted. It has a lot to do with Michael Bloomberg's version of stop and frisk. But despite what you might hear in the mainstream media, Bloomberg's version of stop, question, and frisk can be separated completely from broken windows policing. In the future, I may do a video on Bloomberg's version of stop and frisk and stop, question, and frisk, which was the program instituted before Mayor Bloomberg, and explain precisely why the program under Bloomberg was ruled unconstitutional, while the program that preceded Bloomberg would be perfectly fine to implement today. Another argument against broken windows policing is that it contributes to the unfair over-policing of minority communities within the United States of America. Typically, those who attack broken windows policing on these grounds mischaracterize or misinterpret the program to imply that the goal of the program is to over-police every ticky-tack violation possible. However, despite this popular misconception, that is also not the case. So you may be saying to yourself, Sean, okay, you've already told me a few things that are not true about broken windows policing. How about you actually explain that program? And that is exactly what I'm about to do, and we'll start with the name and the idea behind the name. Now, the basic principle behind the broken windows analogy is that if a building has broken windows that go unfixed, that will lead to further decay of that building or property. Essentially, what is argued by the proponents of the program is that there are small things that if you don't fix right away will lead to greater problems down the line. And most of us can see the logic behind that. If you see a building with broken windows, you might assume that building is abandoned. If a building is perceived to be abandoned, then that perception may attract squatters. Those squatters may attract drug users, those drug users will attract drug dealers, the drug dealers will attract other drug dealers, which will lead to further crimes down the line. And eventually that small problem of a building with broken windows leads to more long-term problems. The damn building might have to be condemned. If you need another analogy to push this point home, think about litter in public parks. Chances are if a park looks clean and well maintained and there's trash receptacles everywhere, you won't have litter. However, if I decided to take 2 weeks worth of recyclables to a place where there was a lot of foot traffic, and I dumped those recyclables in a pile, the chances are if I left that there for a week and nobody cleaned it up, there will be more bottles and garbage in that location. Because people tend to have a bias towards normalcy. You see a pile of trash somewhere, and you think it's not a big deal if you contribute to that trash. And the genius of a program like Broken Windows is that it seeks to identify certain crimes that will normalize crime and nip them in the bud. It's not about broadly targeting small crimes and misdemeanors. It's about identifying which small crimes and misdemeanors set the stage for bigger crimes to occur. For example, in New York City, we had a big problem with pickpocketing or mugging. However, instead of specifically targeting pickpocketers, what the NYPD decided to do was target people jumping the turnstiles at the subway station. And the reason for this was actually really clever. I mean, think about it. If you're the kind of person who violates the social norms by pickpocketing, looking for that easy money, chances are you're also the kind of person who will violate the social norm of paying for your trip on the subway. So as a part of Broken Windows, the NYPD started strictly enforcing the laws against jumping the turnstiles. And the result was, we had less pickpocketing and less petty crime in the city because those criminals were taken off the streets beforehand, before they even entered the city. And other would-be criminals who noticed the step up in enforcement were also deterred from committing crimes. I'm going to show you a picture of a subway car from the 1980s and a subway car that you can see today, and you guys should notice a dramatic difference in how they look. And the reason for the change is that as a part of Broken Windows policing, the NYPD started targeting and eliminating graffitiers. The NYPD actually formed anti-graffiti task force. And when somebody was caught doing graffiti, they were arrested. And the graffiti was immediately cleaned up as a part of the program. And this goes to what we were talking about before about our bias towards normalcy. You see, when you leave graffiti up all over your city, that sends a signal to people who would be criminals that this is an area that's not really being patrolled. You see, just like not fixing the broken windows in your building will lead people to think that the building is abandoned, Not cleaning up graffiti after it's done makes people think that the area is in disrepair and that nobody's patrolling, nobody's watching. Nobody cares about what happens in that neighborhood. So when cracking down on the graffiti problem, they not only save the city and private property owners millions, if not billions of dollars over time, but they also signal to criminals that, hey, look, we are watching what you're doing. We are going through these neighborhoods. We're not going to let our neighborhoods, our communities slide into decay. And that's the reason why broken windows policing is effective. Because contrary to what you've been told, broken windows policing is not about over-policing and enforcing petty laws. It's actually about changing the culture of these neighborhoods, changing the culture of the city. And you cannot argue with the results of it. In 2017, New York City had 290 murders. A number unheard of since the 1950s. Now, to give you an idea of what under 300 murders means in a city as large as New York City, I'm going to compare it to the city of Chicago, which had 650 murders. So New York City had less than half of the overall murders as the city of Chicago. And those are just the raw numbers. Remember, New York City's population is 8.5 million. The city of Chicago has a population of 2.7 million. That means New York City had half the raw number of murders in a city that is 3 times the population of Chicago. New York City is so large that one of the 5 boroughs, Brooklyn, has a population that's actually comparable to Chicago. And the amount of murders committed in Brooklyn last year was 108. By comparison, that's 1/6 of the murders that we see in the city of Chicago. So don't be fooled by the media's narrative surrounding broken windows. It's a policy that works and it's evidence-based, and it shouldn't be tied to some of the other policies that, in my opinion, were bad policies of the Bloomberg administration here in New York City. Bloomberg didn't start broken windows. His radical expansion of stop and frisk is not an aspect of broken windows. And considering that New York City is one of, if not the safest city in the United States of America, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now that I've explained a little bit about broken windows policing and where I think it's effective, I decided that I wanted to talk about some of the opposition to broken windows. And the first thing I wanted to show you was this flyer that absolutely amazed me. And essentially what this flyer is an advertisement for a meetup or a town hall about ending or reducing enforcement for fare jumping because African Americans are too poor to pay the fare according to them and should not be held accountable for cheating the subway system. As you can see, they've renamed it fare beating and they've deemed it a crime of poverty. And of course they show a woman sneaking under the turnstile and she doesn't look that well off in order to sell this victim narrative. Now, unfortunately, this line of argumentation has been effective because Mayor Bill de Blasio has responded by these cries of racism and these cries of poverty by relaxing the enforcement of fare jumping. Now, you can call me racist for saying this, but I think that black people are perfectly capable of paying their own fares just like anybody else. If you've ever been on a New York City subway, you can see homeless people on the trains. If they can figure out a way to get on the damn trains, I think a normal black person can figure out a way to get on the train. We also have specific programs in New York City to help poor people get Metro cards for either discounted or for free. So the idea that you take away all of the personal responsibility from African Americans and just claim that they are incapable of being able to do something like pay for their own subway is ridiculous to me. And it's just another instance of the soft bigotry of low expectations. Now, this next article is from another site that advocates for the ending of broken windows policing. And I'm gonna read through it and hopefully I don't flip out because I can already see a name in here that we've talked about way too many times on this damn channel. Broken windows policing is what led Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson to approach Michael Brown simply for walking in the middle of the street. It's what motivated the police to repeatedly harass Eric Garner, a 43-year-old man who was killed after he's put in an illegal NYPD chokehold. First of all, I feel like Michael Brown is a ghost that's haunting me in particular because we've already discussed this case numerous times and pointed out that Michael Brown committed a strong-arm robbery and all of the forensic evidence and all of the witnesses, or at least the majority of the witnesses, according to Obama's Department of Justice, actually backed Officer Wilson's account of events, not the left's account of events. And look, I think when Broken Windows focuses on on jaywalking in certain areas, it doesn't make any sense. But Michael Brown was walking in the middle of the street of a really busy, almost like a highway type intersection. Like, you guys know what kind of intersections I'm talking about. We're not talking about something that's like a simple block where you can cross in the middle, it's no big deal. We're talking about something that was like borderline a highway. Now, I'm not a big advocate of enforcing jaywalking, but if you're gonna enforce jaywalking, it would be in a situation like that, considering the amount of people who are killed on roads like that. Again, that doesn't excuse Mike Brown fighting the officer, reaching for his gun, or doing a strong arm robbery beforehand. The Eric Garner case was also not a broken windows case. While the officer in that case was in the wrong because he put pressure on the neck, and the NYPD Code of Conduct specifically defines and bars chokeholds, which they defined as any pressure put on a suspect's neck whatsoever. So if you're one of those people who are like, that's not technically a chokehold, any pressure on the neck is a chokehold, and there was clearly pressure on Eric Garner's neck. Like, you can't argue that. In reality, the policy that affected Eric Garner was a memo from the de Blasio administration. You see, Bill de Blasio and Bloomberg before him were really anti-tobacco. In fact, a pack of cigarettes in New York City costs about $14. Now, because of this idiotic near prohibition, New York City is plagued with cigarettes smuggled from other states. Now, Bill de Blasio, being the anti-tobacco warrior that he is, decided that he was going to order the NYPD to crack down on the sale of Lucy's, which are individual cigarettes. So Garner, who was stopped for allegedly selling Lucy's, wasn't stopped because of broken windows. He was stopped due to a specific memo that de Blasio sent out. It's an issue at New York City's Department of Health. It's not an issue with broken windows. Anyway, that's all I really have for you guys today. Let me know what you guys think about broken windows policing in the comments down below. If you like this video, then please show me by leaving a like. You can subscribe for more content, follow me on all my social media, support me on PayPal or Patreon. This has been Sean explaining broken windows policing. Till next time.